Hey, this is Tracy Lewis with Stuff and Things. I am working on my final project of the year, which is, in this case, New Year's cards, which are actually calendars. And I haven't done them, I don't think I did them last year. I might have done them a year before. So this time what I want to do is make mailable calendars. So I came up with two different designs using Pinterest. I will see if I can find the people. They're still on my screen, so I will add those pins, so give them credit. And the first one that I found is an A2 size, and what I didn't like when I was putting it together was just the fact, so this is the full-size card version, and it folds nice and flat, and it does fit in the 1/4 inch jig and weighs less than an ounce, so it is perfectly mailable. But I didn't like having to cut extra material here, meaning I have to use a full 4.5 by 11, plus this particular base was pretty wide, and it cuts into maybe 4 inches, maybe 4.25 into an A2 size card front. So I then did some digging and discovered this version, which is a little bit squattier version, but it is scored out of a piece of 4.25 by 11. And I really liked this layout. The easel is a little bit smaller, and then on the back you make a small 1/2 inch fold to make it all one piece, and it does hold itself up nicely. And so this is the one that I've done the most of. I think I will have 3 of the full height ones, and I may give those to a couple of TGO people and not mail them. And then this smaller size I like because I can have my floral piece here up a little bit, popping off the top. So let's talk about the various pieces. I will take a picture of this and have it in one of the corners for you to see the entire time I'm going through the materials. I used 2 different stamp sets. I pulled from Days to Remember. I had a chance, or I had the option of A Day to Remember and Don't Forget, and I was thinking of mixing them up, but ended up going with just using A Day to Remember. I've done them 2 ways. I did a fussy cut, and then I've done on the shorter one an offset, and I left it square and popped it up. So you could look at like Oh Happy Day. Anything to do with day or forgetting or remembering, I think, are good sentiments. I should also say, since this is the last video of the year that I'll be posting, this may or may not be before Paper Pumpkin, because Paper Pumpkin should arrive any day now, and I'm not sure which one will get posted. So there's actually going to be a total of 2 posts done between now and the end of the year. And next to paper, I chose to use Design a Daydream, and you'll see that I made strips. I chose this pattern paper. I should have a bigger piece floating around here, unless I already put it away. I might have put it away. So I just took out this piece as a point of interest. Other examples use a lot of DSP, rather than just a little strip of DSP. So my very first pattern that I did, I used for the second stamp set, I used Ranunculus Romance. I've been wanting to use this for a big project for some time. I've had it for a while now. And I wanted to use the postage, the keeping notes, anything to do with having a calendar and managing the mailing of things were the pieces that I wanted. And then of course I wanted to use the 2 floral elements. I wanted to do coloring. So this particular design ticks all the boxes. You'll see that on the Pinterest, the examples that I have use different materials and don't do a full background stamping arrangement. So I used blends to color the flowers. I will do my coloring technique with you today. I then used blends to color 3 different trims, which I will review in a moment. In all cases, I used a very subtle embossing folder with clouds and lines because I didn't want to overpower the pattern. You can, if you look at the angles, you can just see a little hint of some lines around the edges, and that's all I wanted, just to make the background paper have a little bit more texture. I also, because my colors are the Bermuda Bay Blackberry Bliss, and then my background bases are just random colors. I picked from the subtles. I think I have Pool Party, So Saffron, Coastal Cabana, Balmy Blue, and those are, I think those 4 are the colors that I chose. I just pulled some and cut them into bases and thought that they would be nice backdrops with I was going to go with pink, but I decided to not go with pink because I already have the Blackberry Bliss coloring and edging, so I didn't want to get it too pink. The black checked trim I picked because of the black lettering. I will also try to find the person who I bought these from. I bought them from a person named Tracy. I don't remember her last name, and she has a print shop, and I pre-ordered these to pick up at the October quarterly meeting, so I believe she has an Etsy store, so I'm going to dig for that and have that also on my blog article with the Pinterest pins. And I like the font she chose. This is a slightly larger calendar. The ones I've done in years past, they were very tiny. So I like this size. It's nice and easy to read. And I think we are going to get started. Oh, I used the adhesive backed seasonal sequins because the colors were a little bit off. There's gold, green, and pinkish red, but I thought that they were a nice offset to the colors, and they're nice and flat and light. When I was picking the materials, I didn't know how heavy these would get, and I wanted to make sure I stayed well under my 1 ounce maximum weight for mailing. And this is the cloud embossing folder. You can see it's just mostly lines, and it just has a really nice subtle appearance. So I believe, oh, and I'm going to tell you the 3 trims that I used. This, I believe, is Retiring. This is the soft seafoam, and I chose it because I wanted to do a Bermuda Bay, so I paired it with the dark Bermuda Bay, light Bermuda Bay over the top. If I had wanted to do Blackberry Bliss with this soft seafoam, I would have it would have been a clashing color if you combined those 2. So I chose a thinner white, the 1/4 inch seaming ribbon to color with the, let's make sure, dark Blackberry Bliss. And then to tie into the text on the calendar, I stripped down the middle and made 2 pieces of the check, black and white check. So those are what I did for there. And there may be, I saw the black and white check when I was looking at all of the examples. Somebody did the black and white check, and I thought it was a perfect way to tie in the black text on the calendar. And let's look at this again now, and you can see where that check black and white is just really subtle. It's not really a strong statement, but it does just enough to tie in this text. Another thing I could have done, and I used black ink. A couple of these, you'll see that I used basic gray, and then I did one, if I can find it around here, that was right here. So here's my So Saffron one. I actually really like it. This is inked up in Rich Razzleberry, a trick that I will use. I've had problems with Blackberry Bliss and myself because Blackberry Bliss is so pigmented. I find it's hard to dry, and I end up brushing it and making a mess with it. So my alternative is to go one color lighter, which in this case is Rich Razzleberry. So these are Rich Razzleberry. Notice right next to the Blackberry Bliss, it just looks like a slightly softer version. And I colored these flowers with So Saffron, and I think that it came out really good. So I have at least one more that I'm going to do in the So Saffron, and I will ink up the flowers in the Rich Razzleberry. I even on the darker ones, this is also Rich Razzleberry, and look, it looks exactly like Blackberry Bliss. And these are black. The colors on the background stamping are, I'm gonna get them here for you. They're also following my lighter. So this is the light Bermuda Bay. This color here is actually Coastal Cabana, because when it's inked, when it's fresh ink, it applies really dark, and I didn't want any darker than this cap. And then I stamped for the lines of the Ranunculus Romance, which look like a ledger right here. I used basic gray because I didn't want the black and white. Sorry, I'm making the thing move. The basic gray because I didn't want the black to be really dark black for the background. I just wanted a soft set of colors. And then the Rich Razzleberry. So you'll see there's this postage stamp, there's some sort of cancellation stamp, and then subtly shown is the ledger in the basic gray. On this first one that I did, I also added the Ranunculus Romance lace edging in Crumb Cake, and I did not like that. So this is worth giving, but I still, for my overall look I was going after, I didn't want it to have like a roughed up edge or a distressed edge or sponged look. And this lace pattern is so delicate, it ends up looking kind of muddy and distressed. So that's why these other ones you'll see have a more clean, simple line edge look, which is what my preference is. And then another piece is one of the sprigs from the die set for Ranunculus Romance are these little star flowers, and you don't get another flower in here. This is just an add-on piece. So I did one cut on every one of the fronts with this little star vellum and just layered it in. Okay, so those are all of the pieces. I'm gonna grab a pile. Like I said, and I've said repeatedly, I am not a good repeat person, so doing this has taken me forever because I've treated each of these as individuals, and the coloring technique that I will share with you is not the fastest, and I'm not in a hurry to do these. I want these to be special and look very handmade. So that's what the flowers look like. Here's the sprig. And then I wanted to share that I did use Terran tape. Terran tape on the large ones gets applied. It's a shape of a W. And I will give you the dimensions of these in a moment. And then you use Terran tape to apply it to the outside edges, or the inside of the base edges. And you apply it to the outsides of the W. Okay, so then to do the calendar, I actually apply the calendar to the Blackberry Bliss layer by adding an edge of the Terran tape on all four sides. I apply it, and then to apply the calendar to the base, because it has a weight to it, I then apply another 4 sides of the Terran tape. I will go over one coloring of one of each of these so you can see the tactic that I used. I also have to say that if you've ever wondered with the alcohol markers, for a person like me who pretty much colors a lot, how long do these blend markers last? I started buying them when they first came out in 2018, started from the beginning, and of course I bought the color lifter in 2018, and the color lifter I use all the time. It has been used with pretty much almost every project. I clean up edges when my ink goes through. This is basic white, so it does have a little bit of a bleed to it, and so if you get close to the edges, you will have to do a little bit of touch-up and push the ink back from the edge. So the white gets used all the time. And of course now I'm looking for the white. So white is used with every project pretty much. Unless it's really simple, I'm going to use it in some way. So I found that it was bone dry the last time I used it, and that means when I pulled it out this time it was bone dry. So I went ahead and used a refill for Copic, because I have Copic markers, and I took one of the nibs out, and the refill for Copic has a spout, so you just put the spout right in and squeeze some of the colorless blender. Means it's just the alcohol, isopropyl alcohol mix of whatever ratio Copic uses. So this has been reconstituted, and if you don't want to buy the refills, you can just go ahead and buy another one. It for a person who doesn't use or color as much as me, this will probably last twice as long. It might last you 8 years if you keep the cap on tightly and you're not using it all the time like I use it. So that's with the the color lifter. And the colors that I have been playing with are on the lighter end of the colors. I choose so I don't use this dark Blackberry Bliss, which is what I've been coloring the trim with. I use light and dark rich raspberry, which are, when you use all four colors, the light and dark rich raspberry goes right into the light and dark Blackberry Bliss. So these two colors get plenty dark enough for what I need. I follow along with this, which is an distinctive stamp, so it has the pixelating. It's like your guide to coloring. So what I generally do is wherever there is the dark is where I am immediately putting on some color, starting with the light first to kind of get my color mapping, and wherever there are less pixels, I try to have less color. And I'm trying to keep this pretty loose, not very exact, not very scientific-like. This flower is farther away. They added more darks here. You can pick whatever part of this flower you want green. I've made this bottom little skirt the green. I tend to color not fast because I enjoy it. And like to have the depth. I would never ever make any money off of any coloring that I do because I am far too slow. So now I'm going to grab the dark rich raspberry. If I can get that to focus. Interesting. Oh, did you see it? For a moment it focused. It might be. Oh, there we go, dark rich raspberry. So now I'm going to add some flicks. And I'm trying to flick in the areas where I see the darkest hint of shade underneath the light rich raspberry. And again, I'm not looking for perfection here because I'm going to do a treatment to these to give it a nice look of depth. And before I do that, I am going to come back a little bit with the light. Before, my idea is to get a little more blending done between the light and the dark before the dark dries. This same technique I'm going to show you, I actually did a video fairly recently with the caroling mice. So I will probably hook in that video if you want to see this technique done with different subject matter. Now I'm going in where I don't want to leave a ton of white. I'm kind of adding in more, but I do want to leave a little bit. And now I come in with my bullet nib. So this is pretty freshly applied, and I hope you can see as I push the color down through the paper, I'm getting light splotches, and the look that I'm going after is sort of a watercolor look. What I like about this is that watercolor is very loose and you don't control it very well, and you can't use regular Stampin' Up basic white paper. You have to use watercolor paper, which is more expensive and it's thicker and heavier. So this technique is great if you want to not add weight. You don't want to have a ton of supplies of all different kinds of papers plus the watercolor, whether you're going to do the dye ink watercolor technique or watercolor colored pencils. So this is just, for me, a very nice controlled way to get a watercolor painted look to it. So that is exactly what I'm after. I've let the bleeding go into the white a little bit. You can even go around the edges of the very light bits to kind of get the color pushed over into the whites so that it's a more soft transition. And you can just add as many of these dots. The longer you hold the pen down, whether you've re-inked it with a refill or isopropyl alcohol, is the more pushing, the more alcohol on here is going to push the color through more. So there's the look. That's what I like. And now I'm going to grab Old Olive Light and Old Olive Dark, which are the greens that I have decided to use. I start with the light, and I can tell you that the bullet nib on these really thin stems, the bullet nib is too hard for me. It kind of gets too fat. So this brush nib, believe it or not, gets really, really thin if you can do a very fine, light pressure swiping down, and you kind of learn how to control this tip. You have to definitely control your pressure if you want to get the thinnest colored lines possible. So that is what I do for these very thin stems. I mean, I am hardly even touching the paper. And I don't even care if the ink, any place where the ink has missed on the stem, I am okay with. It just gives it a more natural look, and some light hitting the stem is totally fine. And again, I'm applying the ink where I see more of the distinctive dots. So they are my guide. And then I'm going to come in with the dark, again using the brush, not the bullet, because with the brush, again, I can get more thinner, wispier lines, which is what I am after. So before this dries, I want to quickly get in there with the light and do a little blending. then the last step is just like I did with the rich raspberry. I will go in with the color lifter, which I think is misnamed. I think it should be the color pusher, which probably just has a weird connotation, so nobody agrees with me on that name. And I will push the color around through the paper so that I get that sort of mottled look that I have in the flowers. And I am using the bullet. If you see staining on your colorless blender, which I don't see any on the bullet, but over here you can see a little bit of discoloration from the years of me using it, you can just test and make sure that there isn't actually any color coming out, and for the most part you'll find that it's clear. So now with the green, I am dotting and adding that alcohol, which is in effect pushing the ink through the paper, trying to soften those edges. I am okay with some of the color bleeding to the white. And that completes this flower. Okay, so there's the look of this flower and what I was after. And now I'm going to go to the skinny, the hollyhock, if that's what it is, looking set of flowers. And I'm starting with the light. And I know that these are about 5 petals. I'm leaving the centers as white as can be. I'll show you what I'm going to do with the centers. This is a very, very small set of flowers, so I'm just hardly touching. And then a tiny touch for the little buds. Going back through some of these sideways ones, I think is going to have green. Going to take again the brush of the dark and do some really soft hints of the petals layering on the petals. Adding hints of shade. And you can see this is why it has taken me forever. When this is all done, I will have made 10 of these over 2 days. I've been doing stuff in between. I don't sit here the whole time. I would probably go insane doing the same cards without breaks, since it's not my favorite thing to do. All right, so we're okay looking there. I am going to go ahead and add a little bit of the green with the brush nib, very, very soft. I also want to add, you could do green or like so saffron in the centers. So the sideways flowers, I'm adding a little bit of green to the edges. Just a feather touch. And this one is so thin, I've not really been adding any green to it. And even this one on the right. Uh-oh, I was off the page the whole time. Oh, so bad. I will revisit this and see how bad it is. I am so sorry. I tend to pull my paper toward me for this delicate work. Hopefully you saw most of that. So again, along these stems, just a touch of green. And again, along this thin stem, no green, and that thin leaf, no green. Now my last step on that is, again, I do use the bullet to push the color around. I am going for round, kind of a round dotted look. And in this case, each petal, I'd like one portion of each petal to have a light and a dark. And so the biggest flower is the easiest one to see. That I am pushing the color through on a portion of each of its petals. Same with that bud. This one is missing a little color. I'll probably come back in and add a little more color. And then I haven't added the dark. I have to complete this little flower. And dark Old Olive, the brush nib, to just add a little bit through the lines and veins of the leaves. And then push with the bullet nib some of the color to just soften those lines. All right, so that completes the coloring portion. Now I'll finish the other two and I'll do my die cuts. Again, on a day to remember, I've been mixing it up between fussy cutting and square cutting, just depending on where I apply the text. And then I promised to show you, this is the separate piece. I made an adjustment to the measurements to make it narrower. This is 2 3/4. And I did on the 2 3/4, I have some notes. I scored at 1/2, 1 3/4, and 2. So, because I like to work so close up, I just have a very small scoreboard. So I have 1/2, 1 3/4. No. Oh, I guess it is 1 3/4. That does not sound right, does it? That must be the marks for the bigger size. Okay, I'm gonna pause. All right, I wrote bad notes. This had to be trimmed down to 2 1/2, so I could get 1/2 on either side, which is the part of the W that you put the tape on the outside to apply it to the inside of the card base. And then the halfway mark is where I want my W to go, and it has to be flipped on the other side, so that is at 1 1/4. So this is my smaller size base that I made for the full A2 size card top. Again, it is 4 1/4 wide. I take a base A2 size in a card front with the matching color. I suppose you could do white if you wanted. And I cut it in half. That makes it 2 3/4. Then I trim off 1/4 so that it's 2 1/2. And then I do a score at 1/2 and at 2. Flip it. And I score at 1 1/4, which is the middle. And when you fold, the trick is that you always fold with the mountain going inside. So there's my mountain, and I'm folding it in. And then I'm going to take my bone folder And there you have it. It does not have to be perfect. And again, I will add tear and tape to the outside. And we'll then put it inside a tent. Here is a tent I have. We haven't even gone over my strategy for the design. So you will put the tear and tape on both sides, apply it, then lay the front down, remove the tape, and there's your base that holds up the tent. So the way I've been applying my background is purposefully not straight, but not totally crooked. And I do my basic gray first, stamp, 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 stamp. I ink in between each one because my gray isn't like overly saturated. And then I apply overlapping the green, or Coastal Cabana. You'll see every place where there's a gray, on one of the corners there's the green. And then I finish off by adding on another corner or another area of the gray ledger, I add the postage stamp in the rich razzleberry. So that was my strategy. Trying to keep it pretty simple because this card is already labor intensive enough. And then you can see where I applied the cloud embossing. And those are all the parts and pieces. I will have photography of all 10 of them. When I get them finished up, I'll put it at the end in the showcase. I wish you all a very blessed new year. Hopefully your Christmas is snowy and white if you want it to. And get this, we're in Florida. The temperatures are going to be going down this week. Christmas is, I believe, is it Saturday? When is Christmas? Oh, it is Sunday. So, Christmas Eve, Saturday night, is supposed to be 31 right now. And if there's precipitation in the air, we would actually get snow here. I cannot believe it. And today, in our house, was the first day that I got up and the temperature in the house was low enough for my heat to kick in. I have my heating to 68 and it was 67. And so the heat kicked on at 9 o'clock this morning to actually heat, and it's the first time I have heard the heat working, which is just crazy to me. Heating in Florida, crazy, crazy. So everybody be safe for the holidays, and I wish you a very great new year. And then I will be back with Winter is Coming Wednesday, middle of January. And we'll just start a whole new year of fun projects. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.